I used to believe that silence could protect important moments. That if I stayed calm, if I didn't ask for too much, the people who mattered would eventually choose me at least once. On my wedding day, I learned how wrong that belief was. There's a photograph I still can't look at for long. It shows me standing at the altar, smiling, composed, steady. What it doesn't show is the empty chair in the front row, the one seat that mattered more than all the others. My mother's seat. She didn't miss my wedding because of an emergency. She didn't miss it because she was sick. She missed it because my sister's promotion mattered more. That's what I was told. That's what I accepted quietly. For a long time, I convinced myself that this was just another compromise I was strong enough to carry. But the truth has a way of surfacing, especially when it's been carefully hidden. And the reason my mother chose not to be there that day wasn't as simple or as innocent as it sounded. Some secrets don't stay buried. They wait, and when they come out, they change everything. Before we continue, if you're listening from somewhere in the world right now, take a moment to share your location and local time in the comments. I read everyone. And if stories about quiet strength and long overdue justice speak to you, I invite you to subscribe and stay with me. I grew up learning how to be easy. Not invisible, just easy. The kind of child who didn't ask many questions, who finished homework without reminders, who learned early that praise was something earned through effort, not expected by default. In our house, being low maintenance was treated like a virtue, and I wore it like armor. My name is Emily. I'm the older daughter. That fact alone shaped most of my childhood. My sister Rachel is 3 years younger than me. From the time she learned to walk, she seemed to pull attention toward her like gravity. She was louder, sharper, more confident. Teachers described her as driven. Neighbors called her special. My mother called her going places. I don't remember anyone ever saying that about me. I wasn't ignored outright. That would have been easier to explain. Instead, I was praised for my independence. Emily doesn't need help, my mother would say with a smile. She's so mature for her age. At the time, I thought that meant I was doing something right. What it really meant was that I was expected to need less. When Rachel struggled with math, my mother hired a tutor. When I struggled with chemistry, I stayed up late and figured it out alone. When Rachel cried over friendships, my mother listened for hours. When I cried, it was usually in the bathroom with the fan on, so no one would ask questions I didn't know how to answer. My father left when I was 13. He didn't disappear dramatically, no shouting, no slammed doors. He packed a suitcase on a Tuesday afternoon and said he needed space. After that, he became a voice on the phone every few weeks, and a card at Christmas with a check folded inside. Rachel took his leaving personally. I took it practically. I helped my mother more after that. Groceries, laundry, cooking dinners when she worked late. I learned to read her moods the way some kids read weather forecasts. If she was tired, I stayed quiet. If she was stressed, I stayed helpful. I don't remember consciously deciding to do that. It just became part of who I was. Rachel reacted differently. She demanded more. More reassurance, more explanations, more room to be upset. And my mother gave it to her often with a sigh that sounded like sacrifice. I learned early that love in our family wasn't evenly distributed, it was responsive. The one who asked got more. The one who didn't was expected to understand. By high school, the pattern was clear. Rachel joined debate student council and anything that came with titles. My mother attended every event camera in hand, pride obvious. I joined the school newspaper and volunteered at the library. I didn't invite my mother to most things. Not because I didn't want her there, but because I didn't want to feel disappointed if she forgot. College made the difference sharper. Rachel was accepted into a prestigious business program out of state. My mother cried when the letter arrived. She called relatives. She posted photos online. She talked about Rachel's future like it was already unfolding in front of her. I was accepted into a solid in-state university. I chose it because it was affordable and close to home. When I told my mother, she smiled and said, "That makes sense for you. No tears, no phone calls, just relief." I worked part-time through college. Rachel didn't need to. My mother called it focus. I called it necessity. None of this felt dramatic at the time. It was just how things were. Families have roles, I told myself. Someone has to be the stable one. After graduation, I moved into a small apartment 40 miles away and started working in project coordination for a mid-sized company. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid steadily. I paid my bills on time. I built a quiet, predictable life. Rachel, meanwhile, moved cities twice in 3 years, chasing opportunities. Each move came with phone calls, advice, financial help, and emotional reassurance from my mother. I listened from the sidelines, offering encouragement when asked, never mentioning how familiar the pattern felt. I met my fiancé Daniel at work. He noticed things about me I had spent years downplaying. My patience, my consistency, the way I listened before speaking. At first, I didn't trust his attention. I waited for it to fade the way attention always had. It didn't. When he proposed, it wasn't extravagant. Just a quiet dinner and a ring he'd clearly chosen carefully. I said yes, through tears I didn't try to hide. Telling my mother about the engagement was restrained. She sounded happy. She said congratulations. Then she asked when the wedding would be and whether it would be small. Not unkindly, just practically. As if my marriage were a logistical detail to sort out. Rachel's reaction was warmer. She hugged me and said she was happy for me. But even then, there was an undertone I couldn't quite name. Something like impatience. Like my news was briefly interrupting her own momentum. I told myself I was imagining it. As the months went on, wedding planning became something I did mostly on my own. Daniel helped, of course, but when it came to family involvement, I kept expectations low. I didn't ask my mother to help pick venues. I didn't ask her opinion on dresses. I framed it as independence, but beneath that was something quieter and heavier. I didn't want to give her another opportunity to choose something else over me. Still, there was a part of me, small, stubborn, and hopeful, that believed she would be there. That on one day, just one, I wouldn't be the understanding one. I wouldn't be the easy one. I didn't say this out loud. I barely admitted it to myself. Because in our family, wanting too much was considered a flaw. And I had spent my whole life learning how not to want. The first warning sign came disguised as a question. So, when exactly is the wedding again? My mother asked it casually over the phone, her voice half distracted. I was sitting at my kitchen table, paperwork spread out in front of me, trying to finalize vendor deposits on my lunch break. I had already told her the date twice. Once when we booked the venue, once when the save the dates went out. September 18th, I said. A Saturday. There was a pause on the line. Not long, but long enough for me to notice. She said. Okay. That was it. No follow-up questions. No mention of travel plans or accommodations. No excitement. Just a thoughtful hum, like she was filing the information away under something less urgent. A week later, I heard about my sister's promotion. Rachel called me first, her voice sharp with energy. She'd been working at a fast-growing consulting firm for a little over 2 years, moving faster than most people her age. I congratulated her sincerely. I was proud of her, it wasn't fake. Rachel had always worked hard in her own way. The promotion ceremony is going to be a big deal, she said. They're flying in execs from headquarters. There's going to be press. Mom's already talking about coming. I felt a small tightening in my chest. Not pain exactly, more like recognition. That's great, I said. You deserve it. After we hung up, I sat there for a moment longer than necessary, staring at the wall. I told myself there was no conflict yet. Dates hadn't been mentioned. Schedules could work around each other. This wasn't a competition. But something about the way she said, Mom's already talking about coming, stayed with me. A few days later, my mother called. Rachel told me about the promotion. She said, her voice warmer than it had been when we talked about the wedding. This is a really big step for her. I know, I said. I'm proud of her. She's been working toward this for years, my mother continued. Opportunities like this don't come around often. I waited. There was something unfinished in the way she said it, like a sentence that wanted to keep going. And my wedding is coming up too, I added gently. Not accusing. Just factual. Yes, of course, she said quickly. I know. Another pause. The thing is, she said, lowering her voice slightly, the timing might be a little tricky. That word tricky landed harder than it should have. How so? I asked. Well, we don't have all the details yet, she said. But Rachel's company is planning something formal. It could involve travel. Or important networking. I don't want her to feel unsupported. I noticed she said her, not me. I understand, I said. And I did. Or at least I understood the logic she was presenting. Careers matter. Timing can be complicated. Adults juggle commitments. What I didn't say was that my wedding date had been set for over a year, that deposits had been paid, that guests were already booking flights, that this wasn't flexible. I didn't say that because I didn't want to sound selfish. Instead, I reassured her. I told her we'd figure it out. I told her not to stress. I told her we could talk later once more details came in. After we hung up, Daniel looked at me from across the room. "You okay?" he asked. "Yeah," I said automatically. He didn't push. He never did. He trusted me to speak when I was ready. That trust felt both comforting and dangerous. As summer moved closer, wedding planning intensified. Tastings, fittings, final confirmations. I handled most of it myself, working evenings and weekends to keep things organized. It was exhausting, but it also gave me a sense of control. My mother checked in occasionally, usually with logistical questions. "What time does the ceremony start? Where exactly is the venue? Is parking easy?" They were practical questions stripped of emotion. She didn't ask how I was feeling. She didn't ask if I was nervous. She didn't ask if I needed anything. Rachel, on the other hand, called often with updates about her promotion. The speeches being planned, the senior partners attending, the expectations. "It's kind of intense," she said one evening, "but Mom keeps saying how important it is to show up strong." I wondered if she heard herself, if she noticed the contrast, if she knew how carefully those words landed. My mother started talking about outfits around that time. Not about what she'd wear to my wedding, but about what she'd wear to Rachel's event. "They want it to look polished," she said. "Corporate. First impressions matter." I pictured her standing in some hotel ballroom, smiling proudly, watching my sister accept applause. I tried not to imagine the same smile missing from my wedding photos. I didn't confront her. I didn't ask directly what she planned to do if the dates overlapped. I told myself it was too early, that assumptions would only cause unnecessary tension. But the closer September came, the clearer the pattern became. Rachel's promotion was becoming an event. My wedding was becoming a detail. About a month before the wedding, I finally asked, "So, have you figured out your plans yet?" I said carefully. There was a long pause this time. "I'm still waiting to confirm some things," my mother said. "But I want you to know that I'm trying my best. Trying my best. Not I'll be there. Not I wouldn't miss it. Just effort measured against invisible constraints." I nodded even though she couldn't see me. "I understand," I said again. After we hung up, I sat alone in my apartment, the quiet pressing in around me. I felt foolish for having hoped for certainty, for having believed that this time might be different. Still, even then, I didn't prepare myself for absence. I told myself that whatever happened, I would handle it with grace, that I would not let disappointment define the day. I didn't realize yet how heavy that silence would feel when it finally arrived. As the wedding drew closer, I learned how quiet preparation can feel when you're doing it without emotional backing. On paper, everything was going smoothly. The venue was booked, a restored barn just outside the city, surrounded by late summer fields. The caterer confirmed the menu. The florist sent mock-ups of arrangements in soft whites and greens. Daniel and I chose music that felt like us, nothing grand, just honest. But behind every decision was the absence of someone I kept expecting to step in. Most of my friends talked about their mothers during this phase, dress shopping together, long phone calls about centerpieces, emotional moments over tiny details that suddenly felt enormous. I listened, smiled, and nodded. I didn't volunteer much about my own experience. When I went dress shopping, my mother didn't come. She said it was a busy week. Rachel had meetings. There were travel plans in the air. Instead, I went with a close friend from college. She was kind and enthusiastic, and she cried when I found the dress. I cried too, but not for the same reason. I sent my mother a photo later that night. "It's beautiful," she texted back. "Very simple. Very you." I stared at the message for a long time. It wasn't unkind. It just felt distant, like commentary on a decision already made without her. I didn't push for more. Invitations went out. RSVPs came back. My mother responded, yes, without a note. "Rachel did too, though," she added. "Might be tight around work stuff, we'll keep you posted." I pretended that didn't bother me. Daniel noticed things I tried to hide. He noticed when I volunteered to handle tasks alone, when I waved off help, when I answered questions about my family with vague reassurances. "Do you want me to talk to your mom?" he asked one evening gently. "No," I said quickly. Too quickly. "She's just busy." He nodded, but I could see the concern in his eyes. Daniel came from a family where support was loud and unquestioned, where showing up wasn't something you had to negotiate. My mother's involvement remained minimal. She asked about timelines, seating charts, parking instructions. She never asked how I felt about becoming someone's wife. She never asked if I was nervous. She never said she was excited. Rachel's career updates, however, became more frequent. There were dinners with executives, strategy sessions, mentorship meetings. Each call came with urgency. Each update felt like a reminder of where attention naturally flowed. One afternoon, about 3 weeks before the wedding, my mother called while I was folding laundry. "I may need to travel the week of your wedding," she said, as if discussing a dentist appointment. "For work?" I asked. "For Rachel," she replied. "There's a possibility they'll want her to attend something in person, and it would mean a lot for me to be there." I held a shirt in my hands and stared at it unmoving. "When would that be?" I asked. "I don't know yet," she said. "That's the tricky part." There it was again. Tricky. "I see," I said. "Of course I'll try to make it work," she added, as if remembering that she should. "We'll just have to see how things line up." After we hung up, I finished folding the laundry slowly, carefully. I placed each item where it belonged. I focused on small, controllable things. That night I lay awake longer than usual. Not crying, not spiraling, just thinking. I realized then that I was preparing myself not for disappointment but for acceptance, for the familiar feeling of being second without anyone saying it outright. The week before the wedding arrived faster than I expected. Final confirmations were made. Out-of-town guests arrived. Daniel's parents hosted a small welcome dinner. They asked about my family, about my mother. I answered politely, avoiding specifics. My mother called 2 days before the ceremony. "I need to talk to you," she said. I sat down. "Rachel's promotion event has been finalized," she said. "It's on the same weekend." My heart slowed, then steadied, like it had been bracing for this, and I asked. "It's important," she said. "There are people there who can really shape her future. I don't want her to feel alone." I waited. She didn't say anything else. "So you won't be coming?" I asked, my voice even. There was a pause, a heavy one. "I don't think I can be in 2 places at once," she said finally. Something in me went very quiet. "I understand," I said, and I meant it in the way I had been trained to understand things my whole life. She sighed with what sounded like relief. "You're always so reasonable," she said. "That's what I appreciate about you." After we hung up, I sat in silence for a long time. Daniel found me there later. He didn't ask questions. He just sat beside me and took my hand. That was enough. The day before the wedding was full of movement. Rehearsal, final walkthroughs, laughter from friends, hugs from relatives. Everyone seemed excited. I moved through it all calmly. I smiled. I thanked people. I answered questions. Inside, I folded myself smaller. That night alone in the hotel room, I looked at my phone. There was a message from my mother wishing me luck. There was a photo from Rachel, her in a sleek dress, standing in a hotel lobby, smiling confidently. I put the phone down. I told myself that tomorrow was about Daniel and me, that the people who showed up were the ones who mattered, that I was strong enough to carry this quietly. I didn't know yet how visible absence could be, how silence once public stops being something you can hide behind. The morning of my wedding arrived quietly. No chaos, no frantic energy. Just soft light filtering through the curtains of the hotel room and the muted sounds of early guests moving through the hallway. For a moment, before memory fully caught up with me, everything felt suspended, like the day hadn't chosen its shape yet. I got ready slowly. My friends helped with my hair and makeup, laughing in ways that were meant to ease nerves. Someone played music from a small speaker on the windowsill. I smiled, responded, stayed present. I had learned long ago how to be good company, even when my thoughts were elsewhere. There was a moment, as my makeup artist adjusted the final details, when she asked casually, "Is your mom excited?" The question was simple, unloaded, and it landed with unexpected weight. "She's busy," I said after a pause. "But she sent her love." It was the truth, just not the whole one. I didn't check my phone much that morning. I already knew there wouldn't be a message saying she was on her way. I knew I wouldn't see her name light up the screen with last-minute questions or emotional reassurances. Still, part of me kept expecting it. The ceremony was scheduled for late afternoon. By early afternoon, guests were arriving, filling the space with movement and conversation. I stayed tucked away, waiting for the moment I would walk down the aisle. Daniel checked in on me once. He kissed my forehead and told me I looked beautiful. I believed him. About an hour before the ceremony, my phone buzzed. It was a text from my mother. "Thinking of you today. I know everything will be perfect. No apology. No explanation. Just reassurance framed as certainty." I stared at the screen for a long time, then locked the phone and handed it to my friend to hold on to until after the ceremony. I didn't want distractions or reminders. When it was time, the music started and I stepped forward. Walking down the aisle felt surreal. Faces blurred together, smiles, tears, nods of encouragement. I focused on Daniel at the end, on the way his expression softened when he saw me. I didn't look at the front row. Not at first. But halfway through, my eyes betrayed me. The seat was empty. It wasn't just that my mother wasn't there. It was that the absence had weight. Everyone else's parents sat together. There were hands being squeezed, tissues being passed, and then there was that one open space perfectly visible. I didn't falter. I didn't slow down. I kept walking, but something in my chest tightened in a way I couldn't name. Not pain exactly, more like a hollowing out. The ceremony itself was beautiful. The words were sincere. The promises felt real. When Daniel and I said our vows, I was fully present. That part of the day belonged to us and no one else. But the empty seat remained in my peripheral vision, like a quiet reminder I couldn't fully escape. After the ceremony, there were hugs and congratulations. People told me how lovely everything was, how emotional, how meaningful. A few people asked about my mother. Not directly, never bluntly, just careful questions, lowered voices. Is your mom running late? Oh, did she have a conflict? I smiled and said she had a prior commitment. I said it calmly, as if it didn't matter. I said it the way I had practiced saying things that mattered a great deal. The reception followed. Dinner, speeches, dancing. Daniel's parents spoke first. They welcomed me into their family warmly, generously. They spoke about showing up, about being present. I listened, smiling, swallowing past the lump in my throat. One of my friends gave a speech that mentioned my strength. How dependable I'd always been. How I held things together. I wondered if anyone ever noticed that strength often comes from necessity, not choice. At some point, I slipped outside for air. The evening was cool, the sky just starting to darken. I stood there alone for a few minutes, letting the noise fade. My phone buzzed again. This time, it was a photo message from Rachel. She was standing on a stage holding a glass plaque. My mother stood beside her, hand on her shoulder, smiling proudly. Behind them was a banner with the company's logo and the words Leadership Advancement Ceremony. We did it, Rachel had written. Wish you were here. I stared at the image until the screen dimmed. It wasn't jealousy I felt, or anger. It was clarity. My mother hadn't just chosen Rachel's event over my wedding. She had chosen to be visible for one moment over another. To be seen supporting success rather than quietly witnessing commitment. I didn't respond. When I went back inside, the party was in full swing. People were laughing, dancing, celebrating. I joined them. I let myself be pulled into the rhythm of the night, but inside, something had shifted. Later, as Daniel and I prepared to leave, guests lined up to say goodbye. My mother wasn't one of them. Her absence lingered until the very end. That night, in the quiet of our room, Daniel asked softly, "Are you okay?" I am, I said. And I was at least partly, because the day had still been meaningful. Because love had still shown up, even if not in the way I had once hoped. But as I lay awake, listening to the steady sound of Daniel's breathing, I realized something I hadn't fully accepted before. This wasn't an accident. It wasn't bad timing. It was a choice. And choices once made in public have a way of echoing longer than anyone expects. The days after the wedding passed in a soft blur. There was no dramatic fallout, no confrontation, no angry phone calls demanding explanations. That was never how our family worked. Things happened quietly, and the silence afterward was treated as resolution. Daniel and I took a short honeymoon, nothing extravagant. A coastal town a few hours away, long walks, slow mornings, meals without schedules. For the first time in months, my body began to relax. My mother didn't call while we were away. She sent a text on the second day wishing us a good trip. On the fourth day, she sent another asking if we'd arrived home safely. The absence of acknowledgement about the wedding itself felt intentional, though I couldn't have explained why. When we returned, life resumed its normal rhythm. Work, errands, thank you notes. Writing those notes was harder than I expected. Each card forced me to revisit the day, to picture who had been there, to remember who hadn't. I didn't send one to my mother, not out of spite, just uncertainty. I didn't know what words would fit. Rachel called me about a week after we got back. So she said lightly, "Married life, treating you okay?" "It is," I said. "We're settling in." "That's good," she replied. There was a brief pause. I wanted to check in. About everything. I waited. I know, Mom, missing the wedding was a big deal, she said. But you know how much pressure there was around the promotion. I do, I said. I just hope you're not mad at me, she added. There it was. Not concern. Damage control. I'm not, I said truthfully. This wasn't about you. Rachel exhaled, audibly relieved. Good, she said. Because things have been kind of intense here. She went on to describe the aftermath of the promotion. New responsibilities, higher expectations, increased visibility. My mother, she said, had been super involved. She's been talking to people for me, Rachel added casually, making introductions, helping me navigate some stuff. I frowned slightly. What kind of stuff? Oh, you know, Rachel said, corporate politics. Making sure the right people notice my work. I didn't comment. I had always assumed my mother's involvement was emotional, not strategic, that she attended events to show support, not influence outcomes. After the call, I sat quietly replaying her words, talking to people for me. I brushed the thought aside. Families help each other. That was normal. It wasn't my place to analyze it. A few days later, I ran into an old acquaintance at the grocery store, someone I vaguely recognized from my mother's professional circle years ago. We exchanged pleasantries. She congratulated me on the wedding. Your mother must be so proud, she said. I hesitated. She wasn't able to attend, I said. The woman's expression flickered just briefly. Oh, she said. I see. There was something in her tone I couldn't place. Not judgment, more like recognition. She was at Rachel's event, the woman added, as if filling in a missing piece. Yes, I said. She's always been very invested in Rachel's career, the woman said carefully. I nodded, unsure how to respond. More than most parents, she added, then quickly changed the subject. I went home unsettled. Over the next few weeks, small things began to surface. Not accusations, just inconsistencies. Rachel mentioned a meeting she hadn't attended but somehow knew details of. A decision that had been made in her favor without her direct involvement. She laughed it off as luck. My mother started using language that felt oddly specific when talking about Rachel's work. She referenced internal processes, decision timelines, even names of people I knew she'd never met socially. Rachel's review committee is very particular, she said once. But they respond well to clarity. How do you know that, I asked. I've been around long enough, she replied. It wasn't a lie, but it wasn't an answer either. The more I listened, the more I realized my mother wasn't just cheering from the sidelines. She was involved in ways that went beyond emotional support. The realization didn't come with anger. It came with a kind of quiet disbelief. One evening, while organizing paperwork at home, I opened a folder Daniel had brought back from the wedding venue, miscellaneous documents we'd collected that day. Among them was an envelope I hadn't noticed before. It had been slipped in with the guest list materials. Inside were a few printed emails, not addressed to me, not addressed to anyone I recognized. At first, I assumed they were someone else's. A mix-up. Then I saw my mother's name. The emails weren't explicit. They were carefully worded professional. They referenced candidate alignment, external advocacy, and timing considerations. Dates jumped out at me, dates that overlapped with wedding planning. With the week of the ceremony, my hands went still. I didn't jump to conclusions. I read them again slowly. They didn't say what I feared outright, but they hinted at influence, at conversations happening behind closed doors. Daniel came into the room and noticed my expression. What is it, he asked. I'm not sure, I said honestly. But I think there's more to why my mom chose Rachel's promotion over the wedding. He didn't speak right away. He sat beside me and looked at the pages. This doesn't look like nothing, he said carefully. No, I agreed. It doesn't. For the first time since the wedding, I felt something shift inside me, not pain, not resentment, curiosity. I hadn't planned to uncover anything. I hadn't gone looking for answers, but they were beginning to find me anyway. And whatever truth was waiting beneath the surface, I was starting to understand why my mother had needed to be there that weekend. Some choices aren't about preference, they're about protection. I didn't confront my mother right away. Not because I was afraid of what she'd say, but because I needed to be certain of what I was looking at. The emails sat on my desk for 2 days, folded neatly back into the envelope. I went to work. I cooked dinner. I answered messages. On the outside, nothing changed. Inside, something had sharpened. I read the emails again late one night after Daniel had gone to bed. This time I paid attention to the details I'd skimmed before. The phrasing, the dates, the sender addresses. They weren't casual messages. They were deliberate, carefully written to sound advisory, not directive. My mother never asked for anything outright. She framed her words as observations, concerns, context, the kind of input that didn't leave fingerprints. One line stood out more than the others. Given the upcoming visibility milestone, timing alignment will be critical to avoid unnecessary scrutiny. Visibility milestone. The email was dated 4 days before my wedding. I closed my eyes. I didn't know the full scope yet, but I knew enough to understand one thing. My mother hadn't been choosing between two events. She'd been choosing between two outcomes. I called Rachel the next morning. She answered on the third ring, breathless. "Hey, can I call you back? I'm heading into a meeting." "No," I said. Not sharply, just firmly. "I need to ask you something." There was a pause. "Okay," she said. "What's up? Did Mom talk to anyone at your company before the promotion?" I asked. Silence. "Then why would you ask that? I just need to know," I said. "Please don't deflect." Another pause. Longer this time. "She might have," Rachel said carefully. "I mean, she knows people." She was just offering perspective. Perspective on what I asked. "On me," Rachel said. "On my work. On my readiness." I let that settle. "Did you know she was emailing them during the week of my wedding?" I asked. "That's not fair," Rachel said quickly. "You know how high pressure this was. That's not an answer." "She was just trying to help," Rachel insisted. "She didn't do anything wrong." I didn't argue. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't accuse. "Was the promotion conditional?" I asked instead. Rachel exhaled sharply. "Why are you doing this?" "Because I deserve to understand," I said. "Just tell me." Another silence. "There were concerns," Rachel admitted. "About timing, about optics, about whether leadership would question favoritism." I almost laughed at the irony. "And Mom being there helped?" I asked. "She reassured them," Rachel said. "She explained things." "Explained what?" "That I earned it," Rachel said. "That any overlap was coincidental." Overlap. My wedding. I thanked her for being honest and ended the call before either of us could say something we couldn't take back. I sat at my desk afterward, hands folded, breathing evenly. The room felt very still. I wasn't angry, not in the way people expect anger to show up. I felt something colder, more precise, understanding. My mother didn't skip my wedding because she preferred Rachel. She skipped it because she needed to manage a narrative, to be present in person to steer perception, to make sure no one asked the wrong questions at the wrong time. I called my mother that evening. She answered immediately. "Hi, sweetheart," she said. "I was just thinking about you." "I found your emails," I said. There was a pause so abrupt it felt physical. "I don't know what you mean," she said carefully. "I found the emails you sent to Rachel's company," I continued. "About timing, alignment, visibility, silence." "I'd like you to explain," I said, without minimizing it. She sighed, slowly, the sound of someone choosing a strategy. "You don't understand how these things work," she said. I was protecting her. "At my wedding," I replied. "I didn't plan it that way," she said quickly. "But circumstances required attention." "Whose circumstances?" I asked. "Rachel's future was at stake," she said. "You were already settled. You had Daniel. Stability. There it was. The assumption I had lived under my entire life finally spoken out loud. "So I was expendable," I said. "That's not what I said," she replied. "It's what you meant." She didn't deny it. "You've always been strong," she said instead. "You adapt. Rachel needs more guidance." I closed my eyes. "And the wedding?" I asked. "Did it occur to you that I might need you there? I knew you'd understand," she said. "You always do." That was the moment something inside me disengaged. "I'm not calling to fight," I said calmly. "I'm calling to let you know that I won't be part of this anymore." Part of what she asked sharply now. "Managing outcomes," I said. "Absorbing consequences so others don't have to." "I'm done." "You're overreacting," she said. "No," I replied. "I'm seeing clearly." A week later, the situation escalated without any involvement from me. Rachel's company announced an internal review. Official language, neutral tone. But the implications were unmistakable. External influence had been flagged. Communications were being audited. Rachel called me in a panic. "They're asking about Mom," she said. "They want documentation, timelines." "I won't interfere," I said. "But I won't lie either. You can't let this ruin everything," she said. "I didn't," I replied. "I just stopped covering for it." The review became formal. Lawyers were brought in. Meetings were scheduled. My mother tried calling me repeatedly. I didn't answer. The truth had moved beyond family dynamics now. It was in professional hands. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't the one quietly holding things together behind the scenes. I was just present, watching, waiting. Some secrets unravel slowly, not because someone exposes them, but because they can't survive daylight. The review didn't explode all at once. It crept forward, methodical and quiet, the way institutions prefer to handle uncomfortable truths. Rachel's company released a brief internal notice about procedural integrity. No names, no accusations, just a reminder of standards and a temporary pause on recent leadership changes pending evaluation. On paper, it sounded routine. In reality, it froze everything. Rachel stopped calling daily. When she did call, her voice sounded thinner, stripped of its usual certainty. They're asking for calendars, she told me one evening. Emails, texts. They want to map out who spoke to whom and when. I said nothing. They're even pulling badge data, she added. Who was in the building? Who attended which events? I pictured my mother impeccably dressed at the ceremony, moving confidently through a corporate space she had no formal role in, present, influential, undeniable. They can't prove anything, Rachel said, trying to convince herself. Mom didn't order anyone to do anything. No, I said. She didn't need to. After we hung up, I sat with the thought that had been forming quietly for weeks. My mother understood power better than most people. Not authority power, the kind that works through implication, timing, and proximity. That was why she had needed to be there that weekend. Not watching from afar, not sending encouragement. She needed to be seen, to be accessible, to shape the narrative in real time. My wedding had simply been collateral. 2 weeks into the review, my mother showed up at my door. I hadn't invited her. I hadn't even told her when I'd be home. But there she was, standing on the porch with a familiar expression, controlled, composed, already prepared to explain. I didn't hug her. Can we talk? She asked. I stepped aside and let her in. She sat at my kitchen table, hands folded, posture perfect. She looked smaller than I remembered. Or maybe I was just seeing her differently now. They're making this into something it's not, she said without preamble. People are overreacting. I'm not involved, I replied. You don't need to convince me. I need you to understand, she insisted. Rachel earned that promotion. I never said she didn't. Then why are you letting this happen? She asked. I met her gaze. I'm not letting anything happen, I said calmly. I'm just not interfering. Her jaw tightened. You could clarify things, she said. Context matters. It does, I agreed, which is why I'm staying silent. She leaned forward slightly. Do you know what this could cost her? Yes, I said. Do you know what your choice cost me? She opened her mouth, then closed it again. That was different, she said finally. It wasn't, I replied. It just felt less urgent to you. She stood abruptly. You're punishing your sister, she said. No, I said. I'm ending a pattern. She left without another word. The review entered a new phase shortly after. External counsel was brought in. Rachel's promotion remained suspended. My mother was formally asked to provide documentation of her communications. She called me again, this time late at night. They're implying things, she said. They're twisting my words. I'm sorry, I said. And I meant it in the way you're sorry when consequences finally arrive. Why are you being like this? She demanded. After everything I've done for you, I thought about the years I'd been praised for being reasonable, for not needing much, for understanding. I'm being honest, I said. With myself. Rachel stopped speaking to me entirely after that. Daniel watched all of this unfold without commentary. When I needed quiet, he gave it. When I needed grounding, he held my hand and reminded me to eat, to sleep, to breathe. One afternoon, an unfamiliar number called my phone. This is Margaret Ellis, the woman said. I'm with the firm conducting the external review for Rachel's company. I'm calling to ask if you'd be willing to answer a few questions. I felt my stomach drop, not from fear but from the weight of inevitability. Yes, I said. I will. The interview was conducted over video. Professional. Precise. They didn't ask me to speculate. They didn't ask for opinions. They asked about dates, locations, observations. Were you aware of your mother's involvement with company representatives prior to the promotion? When did you first learn of those communications? Did your mother mention attending the Ceremony for reasons beyond emotional support, I answered truthfully, carefully, without embellishment. At one point, the interviewer paused. You mentioned your wedding took place on the same weekend as the promotion event, she said. Did your mother acknowledge the conflict in advance? Yes, I said. She did. And she chose to attend the promotion event instead, yes. The interviewer nodded slowly. That's helpful, she said. When the call ended, I sat quietly for a long time. I hadn't intended to be a witness. I hadn't intended to be involved at all. But truth doesn't always ask for permission. Sometimes it just requires presence. The findings were released 3 weeks later. Rachel's promotion was officially rescinded. The company cited procedural irregularities and undue external influence. My mother's name wasn't printed publicly, but her role was clear to anyone who knew the details. There was no dramatic announcement, just an internal memo and a shift in hierarchy. Rachel moved out of leadership track. My mother's professional relationships built over decades went silent. The phone calls stopped. Weeks passed. I thought I would feel vindicated, or relieved, or triumphant. Instead, I felt something quieter. Completion. The wedding photos arrived around that time. I opened the package slowly, flipping through images of smiles and movement and light. There it was again, the empty seat. Still visible, still undeniable, but it no longer hurt the same way. That absence had finally been named for what it was. Not abandonment, not bad timing, a calculated choice. And once named, it lost its power over me. I closed the album and set it aside. Some stories don't end with applause. They end with clarity. And clarity, I was learning, is its own kind of justice. The fallout didn't stay contained the way my mother had always believed it would. For years, she had operated under the assumption that influence, when exercised carefully, leaves no trace. That if you never put demands in writing, never asked outright, never crossed a visible line, you could guide outcomes without consequence. The review proved otherwise. Rachel's company didn't stop at rescinding the promotion. They expanded their inquiry, bringing in compliance officers and independent auditors. Meetings multiplied. Calendars were dissected. Patterns were mapped. And slowly the scope widened. What surprised me most wasn't the speed of it, but the reaction around us. People started talking, not loudly, not publicly, but in the careful, measured tones of professionals who suddenly realize they've been watching something for a long time without naming it. An old colleague of my mother's reached out to me first, not directly about the review, but under the pretense of checking in. I heard things have been difficult, she said when we met for coffee. They have, I replied neutrally. She's very capable, the woman continued, stirring her drink. Your mother. But sometimes capability becomes entitlement. I didn't respond. There were always whispers, she added, about how invested she was, about lines that blurred. I nodded once. That was the thing. None of this was new. It had just never been challenged before. Rachel's company scheduled a formal hearing, not public but structured. Executives, legal counsel, documentation projected on screens. This wasn't about emotion anymore. It was about process. Rachel asked me to attend. I just need you there, she said over the phone. You don't have to speak. I will speak if I'm asked, I replied. And I won't distort the truth. She hesitated, then said quietly, okay. The hearing took place in a glass-walled conference room at corporate headquarters. Clean lines, neutral colors, no room for theatrics. My mother sat at one end of the table, composed as ever. Rachel sat beside her, tense eyes fixed forward. Across from them were 3 executives, 2 lawyers, and a compliance officer. I took a seat near the back, not aligned with either side. The presentation began with a timeline. Dates appeared on the screen, emails, calls, in-person meetings. My mother's name appeared again and again, never attached to a request, always attached to context. One executive paused the slideshow. Can you explain why you were present at the promotion ceremony? He asked my mother. She smiled politely. As a parent. The lawyer nodded, then clicked to the next slide. A calendar entry. And why did you meet with Mr. Caldwell immediately afterward? He asked. To thank him for supporting my daughter, she said. Another click. Another date. And why did that meeting take place before the internal vote was finalized? Silence. My mother adjusted in her seat. I don't see how that's relevant. It's central, the compliance officer said calmly. Rachel shifted beside her. When it was my turn, I was asked to confirm details, not motives, not feelings, facts. Yes, my wedding date had been set well in advance. Yes, my mother was aware of the overlap. Yes, she chose to attend the promotion event instead. Yes, she acknowledged that being present was important for visibility. The room remained quiet as I spoke. I wasn't emotional. I wasn't accusatory. I didn't need to be. The truth stood on its own. At one point, Rachel looked back at me. Her expression wasn't angry. It was something closer to realization. The hearing concluded without a verdict. Those came later in writing. Rachel's leadership track was formally closed. She remained employed but reassigned. The company issued internal policy revisions regarding external influence. Several executives quietly stepped aside. My mother was barred from future involvement with company affairs. Unofficially, her network dissolved. Invitations stopped. Calls went unanswered. The consequences were comprehensive, if not dramatic. After the hearing, my mother approached me in the hallway. "This didn't have to go this far," she said. "It went exactly as far as it needed to," I replied. She searched my face as if looking for something familiar, something pliable. "You could have protected us," she said. I shook my head. "I protected myself." She turned away without another word. In the weeks that followed, I received messages from extended family, some confused, some supportive, some asking why I hadn't smoothed things over. I didn't respond to most of them. Daniel and I focused on building our life, quiet routines, shared dinners, plans that didn't revolve around managing other people's expectations. One evening, as we sat together on the couch, Daniel asked, "Do you regret anything?" I thought about it carefully. "No," I said, "but I grieved something I didn't realize I'd lost a long time ago." "What's that?" he asked. "The version of my mother who might have chosen differently," I replied. The final notice from Rachel's company arrived by certified mail. I wasn't the intended recipient, but Rachel forwarded it to me anyway. It was clinical, thorough, unemotional. At the bottom was a line that caught my eye. The presence of external advocacy at critical milestones compromised the integrity of the process. External advocacy. That was the phrase. Not love. Not support. Advocacy. I closed my eyes. My wedding, I realized, hadn't just been missed. It had been weighed, compared, found less useful. And yet here I was, standing, whole. The irony wasn't lost on me. The moment my mother believed mattered most had unraveled under scrutiny. The one she dismissed had given me something else entirely. Perspective. And with it, freedom. The public moment arrived without ceremony. There was no press conference, no dramatic announcement, no crowd gathering outside a building. Just an internal town hall, mandatory attendance scheduled midweek at Rachel's company headquarters. Employees were told it was about organizational integrity and leadership transition. That phrase alone was enough to draw attention. Rachel texted me the night before. "They're making it public internally. Leadership, legal, everyone." I didn't reply immediately. I sat with the phone in my hands, breathing slowly. I wasn't anxious. I wasn't excited. I felt steady in a way I hadn't before. "I'll be there," I finally wrote. The auditorium was modern and spare all glass and steel. Rows of employees filled the seats, quiet but alert. This wasn't gossip hour. This was formal, serious. At the front of the room sat a long table, the CEO, 2 board members, the general counsel, and the external compliance officer who had interviewed me weeks earlier. Their expressions were neutral, rehearsed. Rachel sat 3 rows from the front. My mother sat beside her. I took a seat several rows back alone. The CEO stood first. "Thank you for being here," he began. "Today's meeting is about transparency, accountability, and the standards we expect at every level of leadership." He spoke carefully, as people do when every word has been vetted. The compliance officer took over next. A slide appeared behind her, no names, just dates and bullet points. She outlined the review. The scope, the findings. During our investigation, she said we identified a pattern of external advocacy occurring during critical evaluation periods. The words landed like weights. Murmurs rippled through the room, quickly subdued. While advocacy is not inherently unethical, she continued its presence during decision-making milestones, particularly when undisclosed compromises procedural integrity. Another slide appeared. This one included anonymized excerpts from emails. Language I recognized instantly. Timing alignment will be critical. Visibility considerations should not be overlooked. I didn't look at my mother. I didn't need to. The compliance officer paused. As a result of these findings, we are implementing immediate leadership changes. The CEO resumed speaking. Effective immediately, the promotion granted to Rachel is rescinded. She will continue with the company in a reassigned role pending further review. There it was. Public. Final. Rachel didn't move. She stared straight ahead, jaw set, eyes fixed on the stage. My mother stiffened beside her. The CEO continued. We also want to be clear, he said, that no employee is responsible for managing external influence. That responsibility lies with leadership and governance. Another pause, and we are addressing that. One of the board members stood. Our policies will be updated to ensure that personal relationships, no matter how well-intentioned, do not interfere with professional processes. The meeting concluded shortly after. No applause, no questions. People stood slowly exchanging looks. Conversations began in low tones, careful and restrained. Rachel remained seated. I waited. Eventually, she stood and turned, scanning the room until she saw me. For a moment, her expression was unreadable. Then she walked toward me. Up close, she looked smaller. Not diminished, just stripped of something she'd always worn easily. They did this in front of everyone, she said quietly. Yes, I replied. They didn't have to, she said. They did, I said. Because it mattered, she swallowed. Mom says you could have stopped this. I shook my head. I couldn't, I said. And I shouldn't have. My mother approached, then her composure fractured but intact enough to perform. You humiliated us, she said, her voice low but sharp. I met her gaze. No, I said. The truth did. You chose this, she insisted. I chose not to lie, I replied. There's a difference. Her eyes searched my face, looking for the version of me she'd always known. The accommodating one, the reasonable one, the one who absorbed discomfort so others didn't have to. She didn't find her. This wasn't about you, she said finally. It always was, I replied. You just never saw it that way. She turned away, placing a hand on Rachel's shoulder. Rachel didn't lean into it. I left the building without another word. Outside, the air felt sharper, cleaner. I stood for a moment on the steps, letting the weight of the moment settle not as triumph, not as revenge, but as something complete. That afternoon, messages began arriving. Former colleagues of my mother, distant relatives, people who had watched quietly for years. Some apologized, some thanked me, some said nothing at all. I didn't respond to most of them. That evening, Daniel and I sat at our kitchen table, the same place where months earlier I'd folded laundry while my mother talked about tricky timing. How do you feel? He asked. I thought about it. I feel finished, I said. With what? With carrying things that were never mine, I replied. The wedding photos sat on the shelf nearby. I took them down and opened the album again, flipping to the ceremony. There was the empty seat. But now I saw something else too. The people who were there. The ones who showed up without calculation, without weighing outcomes. The truth had been spoken in public by people with authority backed by documents and dates and undeniable evidence. I hadn't raised my voice. I hadn't argued. I hadn't demanded justice. I had simply stood still while it arrived. And for the first time, that was enough. After the town hall, everything went quiet in a way that felt unfamiliar. Not the tense silence that follows an argument. Not the avoidance that comes from unresolved conflict. This was a different kind of quiet, the kind that settles after decisions have been made and there is nothing left to negotiate. Rachel didn't call for several days. My mother didn't either. Life continued anyway. Daniel and I fell into routines that had nothing to do with family dynamics or corporate fallout. Morning coffee, evening walks, conversations about work projects and weekend plans. Ordinary things that felt grounding after months of emotional imbalance. The distance from my mother wasn't dramatic. There were no angry messages, no ultimatums, just absence. And for once, it didn't feel like something I had to fix. A week after the public announcement, I received a letter in the mail, handwritten. My mother's handwriting neat, deliberate. I let it sit on the counter for a full day before opening it. She didn't apologize. She explained. She wrote about pressure, about responsibility, about how much she had invested in Rachel's future. She framed her actions as necessary, strategic, protective. She wrote about me too. I always knew you would land on your feet, she said. You were built for resilience. The words didn't comfort me. They clarified something I'd always sensed but never fully accepted. She hadn't trusted me with vulnerability. She had trusted me with endurance. I folded the letter and put it away. I didn't respond. Rachel reached out eventually. Not with a call, but with a message. "I don't know who I am without this," she wrote. I stared at the screen for a long time. "You're still you," I replied. "This just isn't your shield anymore." She didn't answer right away. When she did, it was late. "I'm angry at you," she admitted. "But I think I'm also angry at Mom. And that scares me." I understood that fear. Anger has a way of rearranging loyalties. "You're allowed to feel both," I wrote back. "Just don't let either one make you smaller." We didn't resolve everything in that exchange. We didn't need to. It was enough that the conversation had shifted from blame to reflection. My mother, on the other hand, struggled to adjust. Her social calendar emptied. Invitations stopped coming. The professional respect she'd relied on for decades faded quietly without confrontation. She tried to reassert connection through small gestures, a forwarded article, a message about the weather, a suggestion that we meet for coffee like old times. I declined politely. Not out of punishment, but out of self-preservation. Some relationships can't return to what they were once the truth has been spoken aloud. One afternoon, I visited the venue where we'd held the wedding. The barn sat empty, the fields quiet. I'd contacted the owner to retrieve a few items we'd left behind, a guest book, some decorations. As I stood there, the memory of the day returned not as pain, but as perspective. I remembered how calm I'd been walking down the aisle, how steady my voice had been during the vows, how I'd stood there without looking for approval from anyone but the person beside me. At the time, I'd thought that calm came from practice, from years of being the reasonable one. Now I realized it came from something else. Readiness. I had been ready to stand on my own long before my mother ever believed I could. The consequences that followed weren't something I'd engineered. I hadn't plotted. I hadn't waited for revenge. I had simply stopped absorbing impact on behalf of others. That choice had changed everything. Daniel noticed it too. "You're different," he said one evening. "Lighter." "I think I finally put something down," I replied. Rachel and I met for coffee a month later. No witnesses, no intermediaries. She looked tired but clearer, like someone who'd lost something heavy and hadn't yet figured out what to carry instead. "I don't know if I can fix things with Mom," she said. "You don't have to right now," I replied. "You just have to decide what kind of support you want going forward." She nodded slowly. "I don't think I ever learned how to stand without her," she said. "That doesn't mean you can't," I replied. As for my mother, she sent one final message. "I hope one day you'll understand why I did what I did." I read it carefully before responding. "I do," I wrote. "That's why I won't pretend it didn't cost me." She didn't reply. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was honest. For the first time in my life, I wasn't being praised for being adaptable, understanding, or strong. I was simply being myself without managing the weight of someone else's expectations. Justice hadn't arrived with fanfare. It hadn't restored what was lost, but it had drawn a clear line between endurance and self-respect, and I stood on the right side of it. Time didn't soften what happened. It clarified it. Months passed, and with each one the noise faded. The calls, the explanations, the quiet attempts to reshape the story. What remained was simple and unmovable. My mother had made a choice, and that choice had consequences she could no longer redirect. Daniel and I built our life deliberately, not loudly, not performatively. We hosted small dinners, planned trips we'd postponed, talked about the future in ways that felt grounded instead of reactive. I noticed how rarely my thoughts drifted back to my mother now. Not because I'd shut her out, but because I no longer lived in orbit around her approval. That change surprised me the most. One afternoon, while organizing old files, I came across our wedding contract. Dates, signatures, numbers, everything precise, everything undeniable. The same kind of documentation that had eventually unraveled my mother's carefully managed influence. I smiled at the irony. Facts don't raise their voices, they just wait. Rachel and I found a new rhythm, slower, more cautious, but honest. She took a different role at work, one with less visibility and more substance. For the first time, she talked about uncertainty without immediately asking for reassurance. "I don't know what I'm building yet," she told me once, "but I want it to be mine." That mattered more than any title ever had. As for my mother, we exist now in parallel. Occasional messages, neutral exchanges, no illusions. She is learning slowly what it means to not be central to every outcome. I don't know if she'll ever fully accept it. I've made peace with that. The memory of my wedding no longer carries shame or absence. It carries truth. I remember the way I stood there, calm and whole, even without the person I once believed I needed beside me. I didn't win by arguing. I didn't win by exposing. I won by standing still and letting the truth speak louder than I ever could. Some people are underestimated because they don't demand space, because they endure quietly, because they don't threaten. But silence isn't weakness, and patience isn't permission. If you've ever been the one who adjusted, who understood, who held things together while others took the spotlight, know this. The moment you stop carrying what isn't yours, the balance changes. Justice doesn't always arrive the way we imagine. Sometimes it arrives when we finally step aside and let the weight fall where it belongs. If this story resonated with you, I invite you to share your thoughts in the comments where you're listening from and what stood out to you most. And if you'd like to hear more stories about quiet strength and long overdue truth, consider subscribing. You're not alone here.